Midland, Michigan. A quiet place surrounded by thick woods and winding rivers. The kind of town where neighbors waved to each other, doors were rarely locked, and everyone trusted everyone else. It was the kind of community that made you believe evil could never touch it. For Rebekah Gay, 28, life in Midland was peaceful and full of purpose. She worked as a preschool teacher, loved baking cookies with her students, and spent most weekends with her young son Jacob. Friends described her as gentle, kind-hearted, and full of light. Her smile had a way of making people feel safe. She lived in a modest home on a quiet street, just a short walk from her church. Her faith was strong, and so was her bond with the community. One of the people she trusted most was Pastor Evan Miles, a middle-aged man who had become like family to her. He often helped around her house, checked in when she worked late, and even offered to babysit Jacob when needed. But everything changed on a cold, foggy morning in November. When Rebekah didn't arrive at school, her coworkers called to check on her. No answer. By noon, concern grew. Her mother drove over to her house. The car was still in the driveway, the lights were on, and little Jacob was found sitting alone in the living room, crying softly for his mom. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken glass, no struggle, just silence. The police arrived within minutes. Detective Sarah Langston led the search, scanning every inch of the home. She noticed the smallest, strangest details. Rebekah's purse was still hanging by the door, her phone on the counter, but her bedroom window stood open, and faint muddy footprints led toward the backyard. As word spread, the entire community came together to search. Neighbors walked through the woods with flashlights, calling her name. Even Pastor Miles joined the search party, his face pale and worried. But as the night grew darker, Detective Langston couldn't shake a feeling deep in her gut. That this wasn't the work of a stranger. Whoever did this knew Rebekah, knew her routines, knew exactly when she'd be alone. And somewhere among the searchers, hiding behind concern and tears, was the person who had already silenced her forever. By the next morning, Midland was no longer the peaceful town it had been. News of Rebekah Gay's disappearance spread quickly, and fear began to take hold. Neighbors who once left their doors unlocked now triple-checked them. Parents kept their children close. Something dark had crept into their quiet lives. Detective Sarah Langston was at the center of it all. Her team had cordoned off Rebekah's home and started the search in a wider radius. The footprints from the night before led to the woods behind her house but disappeared near a dirt road. There were tire marks there, faint, almost washed away by the rain. Whoever took Rebekah had used a vehicle. The first major clue came from a gas station camera half a mile away. At 30:27 a.m., a dark pickup truck passed by, heading out of town. Its license plate was covered in mud, but Detective Langston could make out a small sticker on the bumper, a white dove, the same emblem used by the local church Rebekah attended. When the detective visited the church later that day, she was greeted by Pastor Evan Miles, who looked exhausted and grief-stricken. He insisted he'd been out all night helping with the search. "She was like a daughter to me," he said, voice trembling. "I just can't believe something like this could happen here." But Langston noticed something off. His hands were shaking, his fingernails were dirty, caked with dried mud. And though he claimed to have been searching all night, his truck, parked behind the church, looked freshly washed. Still, without evidence, all she could do was keep him on her radar. Meanwhile, forensic teams scoured Rebekah's house. They found small traces of soil near the window, similar to what was found in the woods. On her nightstand was a single earring, the other missing, perhaps ripped out during a struggle. Then came a call from a nearby farmer. He reported seeing something strange early that morning. A man dragging what looked like a large, dark bag near the edge of the river, close to the old bridge. Detective Langston's pulse quickened. She assembled a team and raced to the site. The fog was still thick over the water, and as they searched along the bank, an officer shouted, "Detective, over here?" Floating near the reeds was a piece of fabric, torn, soaked, and unmistakably part of the pajamas Rebekah had been wearing the night she vanished. The horror that had been hidden in the shadows of Midland was now slowly surfacing. And Detective Langston knew this was only the beginning. The morning air hung heavy over the Tittabawassee River as detectives and divers gathered along its muddy edge. The fog still clung to the surface like a shroud, blurring the water into a gray, endless sheet. The discovery of Rebekah's torn pajamas had turned the search from a hopeful rescue into a grim recovery. Detective Sarah Langston stood silently as divers slipped into the cold water. She had worked dozens of cases before, but this one felt personal, too close to home. She'd seen the pictures of Rebekah smiling with her little boy, heard the neighbors speak of her kindness, her warmth. Finding her was no longer just part of the job. It was a promise. Hours passed. The crowd that had gathered along the riverbank began to thin. Just as the sun broke through the clouds, one of the divers surfaced and waved. Something heavy was being pulled from the water. Langston's stomach twisted. It was Rebekah. Her body was found partially wrapped in a blanket, her wrists bruised, her hair tangled with leaves and mud. The scene was heartbreaking. But what caught Langston's attention immediately was a small silver cross around her neck, identical to the ones given out at the church by Pastor Evan Miles. That night, the town's grief turned to fury. Candlelight vigils filled the streets. Posters that once read, "Find Rebekah," were replaced with, "Justice for Rebekah." But Langston wasn't ready to point fingers yet, not without proof. The autopsy revealed something chilling. Rebekah had been struck in the head, then strangled. There were traces of candle wax and faint fingerprints on her neck. The pathologist noted that whoever killed her had likely done so in a place where candles were common, perhaps a church or a home altar. Langston couldn't ignore the pattern forming before her eyes. The clean truck, the muddy nails, the church sticker seen near her home. It all circled back to one man. The next morning she returned to the church unannounced. The building was quiet, the pews empty. But in the back office, something caught her eye. A faint smear of mud on the doorframe and a single strand of blonde hair stuck to a filing cabinet. Her pulse raced. She collected the evidence and walked back toward the front hall, where Pastor Evan stood, hands clasped, eyes heavy. "Detective," he said softly, "have you found anything new?" Langston stared at him for a long moment. "Maybe," she said quietly. "Maybe I finally have." The tension in the air was thick, both of them knowing that the truth was about to surface, and it wouldn't stay buried for long. Detective Sarah Langston sat across from Pastor Evan Miles in the small, dimly lit interrogation room. The walls seemed to close in with every passing minute. Evan's hands trembled slightly as he clasped them on the table. His once calm, reassuring demeanor was gone, replaced by exhaustion and guilt that seemed to ooze from every pore. Langston placed a folder on the table and slid it toward him. Inside were the photos, the muddy footprint from the church hallway, the strand of blonde hair, and the candle wax residue found on Rebekah's body. "Do you want to tell me why all of this leads back to your church?" she asked quietly. Evan swallowed hard, his eyes darting toward the mirrored wall. I don't know what you mean. Rebekah was a kind woman, a member of our congregation. I would never hurt her." Langston leaned forward. "You were the last person to see her alive. Witnesses saw your truck near her home the night she disappeared. And the same candle wax used in your services was found on her body. You need to stop lying." Evan's eyes filled with tears. He covered his face with his hands, his voice cracking. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that." Langston froze. "What do you mean?" He took a deep, shaky breath. "She came to the church that night," he began. "She was distraught. She said she was going to tell everyone about what we had done. About our affair." Langston's stomach dropped. The town's beloved pastor, a man trusted by everyone, had been hiding a secret. She said she couldn't live with the guilt anymore. Evan continued, his voice trembling. "I tried to calm her down, I swear I did. But she started shouting, said she'd ruin me. Ruin the church. I tried to stop her from leaving. I grabbed her arm, she fell." He wiped at his eyes, his hands shaking uncontrollably. "I panicked. She wasn't breathing. I didn't mean to kill her. I thought maybe if no one found out, her son wouldn't grow up knowing what happened. I wrapped her in the blanket and I took her to the river." Langston sat silently, her heart pounding. The room felt colder now, the truth heavy and suffocating. "Pastor Miles," she said finally, her voice low and firm. "You didn't just make a mistake. You took a mother from her child. You took away a life." Evan broke down completely, his sobs echoing through the room. "God forgive me," he whispered over and over. But as Langston stood up to leave, she couldn't help but feel that something about his story didn't add up. Because somewhere deep inside her gut, she knew. This wasn't the whole truth. A week after Pastor Evan Miles' confession, Detective Sarah Langston still couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The evidence matched his story, mostly. But there was one thing she couldn't ignore: the phone records. Rebekah's phone had sent a message hours after her supposed time of death. A message to her sister that read, "I need to get away for a bit. Don't worry about me." It was short, strange, and completely out of character for Rebekah, especially knowing what Evan had described. Langston revisited the church one final time. The congregation was quiet, the building cold and still. But as she walked through the narrow hallways, something caught her eye. A locked storage room behind the choir area. The same room mentioned in Evan's first police statement. She broke the lock. Inside, the faint smell of bleach hit her immediately. The walls were freshly painted, but one tile near the corner floor didn't match. When she pried it open, her flashlight revealed something chilling. Rebekah's broken phone, a blood-stained scarf, and a silver necklace that didn't belong to her. A man's necklace. Her radio crackled. "Detective, you're going to want to hear this," her partner said. "We ran forensics again. The hair found on Rebekah's blanket? It doesn't belong to her or Pastor Miles." "Then who?" she asked, her heart pounding. "It matches a Joseph Miller, the church's caretaker." Langston froze. Miller had worked at the church for years, always quiet, always in the background. During the early part of the investigation, he'd been cooperative but nervous. Too nervous. They brought him in for questioning. As soon as he sat down, he broke. "It wasn't supposed to go that far," he cried. "Pastor said she was going to destroy everything. He said we had to scare her. I didn't mean to hurt her." Langston realized then, Pastor Evan hadn't acted alone. He'd manipulated Joseph, convincing him to help cover up a crime born out of fear and pride. The final piece click. Evan had sent that text from Rebekah's phone after she died, to delay suspicion, while Joseph helped hide the evidence. When the two men were finally sentenced, the town's illusion of holiness shattered completely. The church closed. Rebekah's son, now living with relatives, would grow up never truly knowing the full horror of what happened. As Langston stood by the river where Rebekah's body was found, she whispered to herself, "Even evil can wear a collar." The wind rustled through the trees, a quiet reminder that behind every perfect smile, sometimes the darkest sins hide.